My name is Brandon Hartung, and I'm a media missionary who travels the world using photography and video to tell the stories of impact those missionaries and ministries are having, and inviting others to join in those efforts. Today's episode is sponsored by Gospel Lighthouse Church in Blytheville, Arkansas. Services are every Sunday and Wednesday. You can join a service in person or online on YouTube, Facebook, or check out myglc.org. Gospel Lighthouse Church. People are our greatest investment. In today's episode, I'm joined by retired missionary Shari Sorah, who have actually served with her and her late husband in Honduras. They were involved with street ministry and ministering to the homeless and drug addicted in what was for many years considered the murder capital of the world, San Pedro Sula, Honduras. So she has some awesome stories to tell and advice to give for partnering with and supporting your missionary friends, whether home or abroad. So with that, let's jump right into the conversation. All right, we're joined here in the studio with my missionary friend, Shari Sorah, and you were a missionary for many years in Honduras.
Yes.
And had the pleasure of knowing you for a long time and working with you on the field. And now you're hanging out at my house for a night. It was really cool. Yep. So thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell people a little bit about what you did in Honduras and your time there.
My husband and I moved to Honduras in June of 2006. We'd actually been there the year before, went back, and we weren't really sure what we were going to do. We knew that God was calling us, but we weren't positive. But we had always done children's ministry. We had always done food ministry. And so we went to the street and we fed the kids. My late husband, used to make weird sandwiches. Someone had given him a jar of pepper jelly, and he was making peanut butter and pepper jelly or pepper jelly and cheese sandwiches, whatever, which sounded disgusting.
Yeah,
but
you're hungry.
The kids loved them, and we would go to the street, and we had almost no Spanish. And from there, God it's almost like looking through a peephole in a door. You see like a little vision. And it just kind of opened up, which we said years later that we were glad that God didn't show us the whole mission at one time, because I think it would have scared us completely. Because once we really got into doing ministry, going to the street, it grew every single week. And then we got a building. In the beginning of when we first got the building in 2008, we had 23 people there the first day. And at the end, we were having normally about 200 people.
Wow.
And we considered it a church. Mm-hmm. Most of the homeless people, a couple of times we would take them to church with us. So they'd come on to church with us. And it was made very clear that they really weren't welcome there. They smelled bad. They weren't dressed the right way. We went and got clothes for them a couple times, but they really didn't feel like they belonged there. But our ministry was, for them, their church. I mean, you were there several times, and they came in.
Accepted there. Yeah.
Yep, they came in. I was talking to my daughter. I traveled to your house, as you know, with my daughter, Laura, and we're driving cross country. And so we wanted to stop and spend some time with you and your wife and daughter. And I was talking to her about how when people came in the door, there was someone sitting at a front desk, and they would write their name. And if it was a child, we'd put a star next to it. So before we served the plates of food, you could count how many adults there were and how many kids, so you knew how many plates to do. And then they would be patted down, and then they'd go to this Dutch door, and if they had drugs on them, they could check them. If they had weapons, they could check them. And then after they got patted, they could go out to the shower. My husband would always, I don't know if you ever saw him do the shampoo, but he had a big bottle of shampoo that we would water down just a little bit, and he would put it in their hair. And other people would say, let me do that, whenever we had people coming and serving with us. And Terry would say, you're not doing it right. Yeah, Terry was a bit of a character. Mm-hmm. And he always had to, when he put the shampoo in their hair, he always went, so if they didn't go,
the noise, make the noise while you do it.
And the guys actually expected that. And then they would go outside and they would take a shower, and we'd give them like a little fine piece of soap too. And they had a toothbrush that was under their name, and so we'd give them their toothbrush, put some toothpaste on it, and then they'd come in and they would have coffee, and the kids would get a glass of milk and some peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And then when it hit, I'm trying to remember now what time we started. I think it was 2:30 that we started worship. And we would do worship, and we would do like 20 minutes of worship, and then someone would preach. And while they were doing that, I was usually in the kitchen with my volunteers, Mercedes and Consuelo and Alba, and we'd be putting together plates. And if you have to do 200 plates and you've got 20 minutes.
At the job, yeah.
I mean, but we had it down, Consuelo was in town. She's actually in the country right now on a visa. And I met up with her, and we went to Augusta, and we were talking about how fast we could do plates. we were a team,
Yeah.
But one of the funny things about the guys is that they would try to sneak in weapons.
You got to think. Explain like where you were at and what city and what this part of town was like, so people could really get a grasp.
We were in San Pedro Sula, Honduras. And at the time, we were there from 2006 through the end of 2015. We were number one in the world.
Yeah.
The most dangerous city in the world.
For murder. It was the murder capital of the world for several years in a row.
But for us, I never felt unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't. It was a God thing. If someone stepped out of line, Terry would do one thing. He'd say one word. He'd say, Shari! and
get 'em.
And if I started walking toward the front of the building to talk to someone that was being rude or not doing whatever, I was like, don't call Mama, don't call Mama. And it wasn't that they were afraid of me, but they didn't want me to be upset with them.
Yeah, well, it's like, upsetting your mom.
It really was, But I would often be walking with someone, and I'd put my hand along their back. I was telling you this yesterday, and along your back, you have kind of an area that's like kind of caved in a little bit, just like, and you can literally hide a knife there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would, because I believe that touch is so important, to reach over and say, how are you today? For people that are living in the street who don't ever have a kind touch.
Nobody wants to look at them.
I hugged them. If they had a boo-boo, I would wash it, put a Band-Aid on it, and then I would do what?
Yeah,
I'd kiss it.
Give them a kiss.
I'd give them a kiss, because they needed that. So quite often I, just put my hand on their back. It's like, oh, you brought a knife. Do you want to donate the knife to our ministry? That's really nice. No, that's fine. And I just kind of give them that look, and it's like, oh yeah, this is a gift for the ministry. So we had 8 really good knives in the kitchen that I had confiscated over the years.
It cut a whole melon in half.
We had one knife that I don't know who gave us this knife, but I swear this thing, the blade, not the whole thing, but just the blade part of it was like this long. I wouldn't touch that thing. I was afraid it was going to just cut off my arm. It was sharp, but we'd have our time of worship, and then someone would preach 20 minutes, and talking people that are addicted.
Yeah.
People that, alcoholics, drug addicts, women in prostitution, they're not going to listen to a long sermon.
Yeah.
So 20 minutes, and then we would serve food. And then we had men from Ministry Vita, which is a men's rehab center, and they were there. They did help with intake, wrote their names down, patted them down, helped distribute stuff. And then at the end of the day, they took up all the chairs and mopped the whole entire building, cleaned everything up.
Wow.
And, we didn't see, with addicts, you don't see a lot of change, but we baptized 3 women and I think just 2 men, maybe 3 men. But those people all changed their lives. I mean, drastically changed their lives. I still get messages from them, and I've been back in the States for 8 years. And I still get messages. How are you doing, Mom? It's just...
There was one story you were telling me earlier about the lady that said about you when you kissed her forehead. No, tell that story.
Oh, the guy that
The guy.
the guy that kissed his forehead. Yes, and I'm not going to say what his name is that he's known as, but he had been in the street for about 10 years, using crack and who knows what else. And he was very well known in the street, just like all the people in the street. They know each other.
Mm.
And we were in the street one time. This is after we'd had our building, but we'd gone back to the street a couple different times just to reach out to the people that didn't come to the building. And he had a big cut on his forehead. And I had a bag that you could hang, for garbage or whatever in your car. But I used it as a first aid. I had peroxide and bandages and whatever. And I've got a picture of him sitting on the ground while I patched his head up. I washed it up with peroxide, put a Band-Aid on, and gave him a kiss. And about 2 or 3 months later, we went to a crusade that was huge. La Crusade is one of the biggest churches in Honduras, and thousands and thousands of people there. Well, someone saw us in the crowd, and we had a couple people from the street with us. Someone saw us in the crowd and said, come on, you need to sit with all the pastors. And we're like, no, we had people from the street. We didn't want them to feel uncomfortable. I don't need to sit with pastors. I'm fine with the crowd. And they were like, no. They insisted we go and sit. So we took them with us. We go sit down. And I see this guy walk by, and all the guys from Ministerio Vida, the men's rehab center, sorry, I'm hitting my mic, had on white shirts with red crosses that said staff. And this one guy walked over to me and just got real close to me. And the guy that I had patched his forehead was very skinny because he was addicted. And this guy was very, very buff. And he asked me if I knew him, and I said, he looked familiar. And he didn't tell me who he was. He just pointed to his forehead. And I'm an emotional person, and I started crying because I knew who he was. And then going forward, maybe a year and a half or more, we were at Price Mart, which is like Costco. And this guy was pushing one of those big, huge stacks where they put the meat trays on. So he was working in the meat department there. And he walked by, and Terry was behind me. We were near the refrigerators where they have all the cheeses and stuff. And he just walked by Terry and didn't say anything to Terry. And comes over to me, and I had Angie with me, one of the girls that was living with me, pastor's daughter. And he just stood there with this big grin on his face. He didn't say anything. He just looking at me. And then he said, do you know me? And I said in my best weak Spanish, your face is very familiar. And again, he did the same thing. He just pointed to his forehead, and I lost it.
Instantly, yeah.
I just was like, oh my gosh, just lost it. Well, he posts on the anniversary of him changing his life. He posts that who has helped him in his life, and he talks about an aunt and his girlfriend, and I think maybe a grandmother, whatever, and then I'm on there too. He's got a picture of me, and me, under my name, it says spiritual mother. And that's just, it, I mean, you don't know what you do. But he said, when he saw me at the crusade, he said, I didn't know he had gone to the men's rehab center. And I told him I was very thrilled with that. I'll be praying for him to get all the way through recovery and to have a full life. And he said, the day that you patched my head, I saw Jesus in you.
Wow.
I mean, is there a compliment better than that? I was just like, I didn't really do anything. I patched his head, and I kissed him like a mom.
Yeah.
And you don't know
you're representing that love, though.
Yeah, you just, especially for people that are living in the street. We knew so many kids. I can't even tell you the number of kids that at 5 or 6 went to the street because they live in one of the squatter villages along the rivers. And the family has 5 or 6 kids and can't afford to feed them all. And they'll tell them, I'm sorry, you got to go to the street.
Yeah, you see if you've ever been to Honduras, is the kids in the street begging.
And huffing glue. They're addicted to glue. Yeah. Usually, Brandon, within a day or two. Because the glue takes their hunger pains away.
Wow.
But the other guys in the street will give them the glue, and they'll also take everything that they have with them. So their shoes, their good clothes, so they'll be walking around in just rags or whatever. Well, these kids in the street, how often do you think anyone treats them nice? How often do you think someone gives them a hug or a kiss or treats them like they're their kids?
Right.
And they are our kids. You know, these kids, they deserve a chance. And
that's part of the reason the gangs and stuff got so bad there.
Absolutely.
They're seeing that family presence from the gangs. And, I was talking to another local pastor recently. He was saying he saw, the gangs out giving food and stuff. And like, they're not just being nice. They're in the process of recruiting.
They're recruiting.
They're like, look, you can look to us to meet your needs.
We'll be your family.
Yeah. So
and that's what these kids are looking for, is family.
Yeah.
Whether this family is someone's going to, use them like the gangs do.
Yeah.
And pull them into that kind of life, which is a dead end. But you see these kids, and so many of these kids were such nice kids, but on glue, they're nuts.
Right.
And it destroys their lungs. It destroys their organs. A lot of them die so young. And just, we didn't get a lot of those kids coming to ministry because they couldn't stay away from the glue bottle. They literally would hold the glue bottle under their shirt and be huffing constantly. And obviously, we did not allow them to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'd hide the glue bottles outside. They would run in and out, and it's like we lock the doors once we start worship.
Yeah, you can't control.
Once
coming in and out.
Yeah. Once we start worship, those doors are locked, and everyone there knew it. Lock the doors. We don't want people coming in the middle of our preaching. We want them to hear the word.
Yeah.
Then they get a good meal, and they get, it's just, it's difficult because there's so many people that are in the street that don't feel that they can change their life. I had one guy that is, he's no longer at Ministry of Vida, but he was a leader at Ministry of Vida for probably 6-8 years. And when he finally went there, we had known him for quite a while. He had heard sermons. He had been in our ministry. He had heard us preaching in the street. And I said, what kept you there? What kept you in the street? And he said, you don't understand. My sin is much bigger than your sin. And I said, that's Satan's lie.
Mm-hmm.
That's Satan's lie. John 10:10. It's just, he wants to destroy you.
Yeah.
He's going to keep you under his fist, and that, God looks down. And I used to tell the story that if you go out and buy some wood, you buy a 2x4, and, I've done this and I've done this. I've dishonored my parents. I've told lies. I mean, we're all sinners.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone else might be a murderer and an adulterer, and maybe their piece of wood is 10 foot longer than my piece of wood. But on the top of that piece of wood is the word sin. And when God looks down, he says, oh, there's a sinner, there's a sinner, there's a sinner. He sees us all equal.
Yeah.
And I've told that
2x4 from the top or whatever it goes. Yeah.
And I've told that story to so many guys from the street, and you can just see them like thinking about it. But you don't understand. I mean, I'm a bad guy. And I said, I'm a bad girl.
Yeah. Jesus
I said, if we do one sin, it separates us from God. And the only way that we can tear down that wall is by accepting Christ.
Yeah. And he covers everything.
And he covers it all.
Yeah.
It's like all of our sins are written on a big board, and he just comes and he just,
yep.
Oh no, there's no sins left.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I had more than you. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, zero now. Yeah.
It's zero, and it's really hard for people to understand. And that's how this guy was. And he was like, "But you don't understand." I said, "I do understand."
That's what's so crazy. That's crazy.
We are separated. There's like a big wall.
Yeah.
A big, huge wall. We went to the fort today, Fort Smith, and we went into this one building that had been the commissary, and the walls were like 3 or 4 feet thick or more, and the wall between us and God is bigger. It's, and we're separated. And Christ just said,
Yeah. Like the Kool-Aid man.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, he just busts out of it. It's, and it's really hard to see someone that gives up on themselves because they don't believe that God could possibly love them.
Yeah, well, that's why it's called the good news.
Yeah,
The gospel is the good news.
My great-grandson.
Good news.
My great-grandson Cashton. He's a handful. He's we've had problems. The little boy's lost his mom, and I've got this. He's not an easy child, but he loves going to church and he loves the Lord. And he will go up to strangers and he'll say, "Do you know the good news? Jesus really loves you." And you hear a 6-year-old say that, and he gets it.
Yeah.
He gets it, And these guys in the street they just cannot believe that God could possibly love them.
They just had the lies whispered to them over and over and over, maybe even shouted at them.
Yeah, it's just it's hard for them to understand. How could I be lovable? I'm a mess. It's like, I'm a mess too.
Yeah.
That's
what makes me in awe of how unworthy we are of it,
I know.
Wow, that's so cool.
It's just, I'm reading a novel right now, but it's based on the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I'm at the part right now, I hate putting the book down, and I usually read for about half an hour every night, but I hate putting the book down because I'm right at the part where Christ is on trial. Mm-hmm. And you read this, and you think, look what he went through.
Yeah.
And he did it. And he was thinking about me.
Yeah.
And these guys in the street that's what keeps them there. It keeps them bound. But when you see one of these guys change their life, this one guy, the first guy that we baptized, the pastor from Minister Vita said that he wanted to do the baptism. I said, that's fine, because he often came and preached. And so he did the baptism. Well, this guy, we actually took an offering in our ministry, which is kind of a goofy thing,
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't for the money. And we would usually get, a limpera is worth about 6 cents.
Yeah.
And so we might get, there's like 150 people there or more. We might get 20, 30, 40 limpera.
Yeah.
I mean, so
$1 to $2.
So
basically.
Basically. Sometimes there would be a little bit more. And I noticed that every once in a while there would be like a bill that was folded in a funny way. And so when I unfolded it, it was actually a 1 and a 1 and the lunch meat. It's like a sandwich. In the middle would be a 50.
Mm.
It's like, these guys don't give 50s,
Yeah.
And we didn't collect the money for us, but for them to understand that they can give back to God.
Yeah. Even if it's a little, whatever you have.
Even a little bit, so that they show their appreciation for what he did for them. And I told Terry, I just never mentioned it to him that every once in a while this 50 would be in there. And once in a while it'd be like 100. It's like, who's putting that money in there? I always thought maybe it was a time when we had someone else serving with us, an American, and they stuck it in there. And then I realized, no, it's not a time that we had someone else come in. And we figured out that it was this guy, Roberto, that's the first guy we had baptized. He was working, he had been a severe alcoholic. He was working up at the market where they move these 50-pound bags of beans and rice and whatever. He was working up there, and he would come, and he never stayed for the preaching because he had to be at work.
Hmm.
So he'd come for the social hour is what he called it, because they would have coffee.
Mm.
And so he would be there with a couple other people talking, and he would always go and get a Bible and set the Bible on the table. And so someone could, open up the Bible. So he was encouraging others to accept Christ.
Yeah.
And putting this in there just to show
being a good example.
Lord, you want,
look what can happen.
So when I realized that, Terry and I were both like, wow, just this guy was just so grateful to us for what we did for him. And it's like, we didn't do it. We didn't do it.
Yeah, you just got to believe the truth, not the lie.
But it's so hard for them to get stuck in that. no, God can't love me.
Yeah. Oh, that's in the States too.
I'm not lovable,
Yeah.
you know? And you see these guys, make a change and they might not do anything big, grand with their life. They're not going to become a vice president of some company or whatever, but they're back with their families.
Yeah.
They, a lot of them are away from their family. The one guy was talking about that patched his head, that I, put a bandage on him. He became such a different person. I see pictures of him on Facebook all the time, and my comment to him is always, "Give me a smile." He seldom shows a smile. He always looks real serious, but he's such a great guy. He's so grateful to God for the change in his life. He had when he finally got himself together, accepted Christ. His son was about 3 or 4 years old. When his son was about 5, when he was working at PriceSmart, I had run into him at the store, and I had asked him one time. I said, "Why don't you come and give your testimony one day?" He's like, "I can't do that." I said, "Well, okay, well, just think about it.
Yeah.
Maybe one day you will." And I'd get in line at PriceSmart when I went there, which is usually once every couple of weeks. And every once in a while, I'd feel someone come up behind me and give me a big hug. And I always knew it was him. He always gave me a hug. I was, his spiritual mom.
Mm-hmm.
And why don't you come and give your testimony? And so I didn't bug him about it. I would just mention it. And after about the 4th or 5th time or whenever, I said to him, he said, "You're there Mondays and Thursdays, right?" He said, "I'll be there Thursday." So he was there Thursday, and my friend Justin, I don't know if you met Justin, but he's a missionary, and he had a ministry that he's now actually in Thailand.
Oh.
So they moved to Thailand and doing ministry there and kind of doing the same thing up in this mountain area. But he was there, and he was going to preach that day. And he brought his guitar, and he was going to do worship with Jerry. And so the guy comes in, and he stands up, and he gives a little bit of his testimony, just kind of, how God had changed his life. And even though I thought that I couldn't change, my life is changed.
Mm-hmm.
And really didn't say anything else. And stood back from the microphone, and he was done. He was done. And then he looked at me, and he said, "Shari, is it okay if I really explain what happened?"
Yeah. That's what I want to hear.
And so I told Justin, I said, I guess you're not preaching today, And he gave his testimony about he did not think it was possible. And there were so many people in the audience, in the congregation, that were yelling his nickname that everyone called him. And so many people knew him. And to see someone that is a mess, and then see their lives change. And
Change that only God can do.
Yeah. Yeah. And he gave his testimony and told them how his life had changed and what he was doing and the job that he had, and just, and how grateful he was to God for the changes in him that he didn't think was even possible. I mean, that's when you hear a testimony that you have to pay attention to, because I knew this guy. I saw him in the street. I knew, and and to see the look on his face, I'm very visual, so I can actually see him as I say this.
Mm-hmm.
And see how his face was when he says, "Is it okay if I really?" It's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, these people are the ones that need to hear it. Yeah.
And to say, I did it, just I was downtown several times when I've been back to Honduras. I was downtown one day with Anna, and I was looking to buy something for the women and as a gift. And someone came up from me, and downtown area is not really safe.
Mm-hmm.
And someone came up behind me and put their arms around me. And I knew instantly. But I knew instantly who it was, because he would come up with a kiss on my cheek and a big old, and he's not a big guy, but he is muscular. He's doing some weightlifting and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's not one. They can't do it. They can't change. Took a couple notes of things I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
We didn't become missionaries until we were in our late 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Most people that go into the mission field are in their 20s.
Yep.
Maybe some of them even younger. But the church, I didn't accept Christ until I was 48 years old. I mean, if you asked me if I was a Christian, I'd say I was a Christian, but I'd never had a relationship, never understood relationship.
Christian.
I mean, I always say it's better in Spanish because in Spanish we have two to knows. Saber is to know a thing. I know that this is a globe.
Mm-hmm.
But conocer is to know a person. Yeah. I had the head knowledge. I knew who Christ was.
Yeah.
So I was a Christian.
But you didn't know him.
But I didn't know him.
Yeah.
I did not know him at all. And we went to a concert, and I heard an invitation for Christ. I had never, there's a lot of churches that don't really talk about how important it is to not only know who he is, but to have a relationship with him. And I didn't go up that day. I was sitting with my grandkids, and Terry's uncle and aunt were just a couple of years older than us. And so I was kind of cemented in my chair. But I told my pastors, they've heard this story. It's like Christ put his foot in that door, and that door was not going to shut back up. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't going to shut back up because Christ said, no, she's got her heart starting to open up. My life started to change, and we started taking these classes at our church. They had called them insight classes, and every Wednesday night there would be these classes, and so they might have like 6 in a row. Like, so you sign up for this class, and so you take, for 6 weeks you'd be in this class every Wednesday night. Well, I had taken a couple classes by this one pastor whose name is Scott, and just adored him. Terry and I got to know him personally a little bit. The Bible study I was doing with the ladies, I sat with his wife, and I mean, I was a Christian, kind of a Christian, baby Christian, Mm-hmm. There was things that I didn't understand. I mean, it was like I was
not born with knowledge.
I was still very, very young in my walk with the Lord, and we took a class. We signed up for a class, and the only reason we took that class was Scott was going to teach it. And it was for anyone going on a mission trip had to take this class. Well, we're going on a mission trip, but we were not going on a foreign one. So we didn't have to take the class, but we love Scott. So we took this class. So
I had a plan.
Oh, absolutely. The first night they talked, I don't even remember what the lesson was that first night, but each week they highlighted a different mission. The second week was about this couple who had applied to be missionaries. He was 59 and she was 57. They had been teachers. They retired early, and they wanted to go in the mission field. And they were turned down by several mission groups because most of them recruit young couples that are going to do this for 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And they finally were accepted by a group. They went to Africa. They were teaching out in a field. They had a little bit of a, cover over it or whatever, so it was all, which we've seen lots of church. Yeah. See lots of churches like that. Mm-hmm. And every single person in this community, this village, came to every single lesson they had. And one day, one of the ladies went into labor, right? It was the time of the lesson, and they took her out there on the cot, and she delivered out there.
Oh, my goodness.
At the end of them teaching, and I don't remember if it was weeks or months or whatever it was, at the end of this, every single person of an age to understand accepted the Lord.
Wow.
Now, we had already been to a couple of other classes. We got in the car. We were like, where we lived and where our church was about 2 miles away. Get in the car. I look over at him. He looks at me. And we just both kept saying, missions. God, we knew at that exact moment, God was saying, you are being called to missions.
Yeah.
And I said,
it doesn't matter about the age, it matters about the obedience. Saying
when we went over there, we really did not know what we were going to do. We knew that we'd always done children's ministry, homeless ministry, food ministry. And I'm trying to put together, I'd never done a PowerPoint. I'm trying to put together a PowerPoint. We were going to go to Detroit, where I'm from Georgia. So we figure I'll put together a PowerPoint. We're going to have to raise some money, obviously, if we're going to go into the mission field. And Terry, I was working on it, and I didn't really know how to do it. And someone told how to drop things in, and God just, I didn't write it. I'm telling you, I didn't write it. God wrote it. You did street ministry or homeless ministry. You did children's ministry. You did food ministry. So go to the street and feed the kids.
Do what you know.
That's what I've taught you to do for the last 20 years. I mean, Terry and I did that from the beginning of our marriage. That's what we always did. That was our passion. Mm-hmm. And it just was like, well, duh.
There's a reason the person that created you created you that way. Yeah.
And I mean, I believe so strongly that each of us is created for a purpose.
Yeah.
God created me. You know, street ministry is not easy.
Yeah.
I mean, you know it.
Yeah.
For me, for Terry, it was easy as could be, because that's what we were created to do.
Yeah.
I'm a hugger. I've always been a hugger. I mean, have I ever greeted you without hugging you? No. That's what I do. I walked over to Kristen, gave her a big hug. People in the street don't ever get hugged. The first time I ever hugged a guy, his name was Marvin. Hugged him. He was living behind Burger King. Or behind the gas station that was back to back with Burger King. And we saw him, and we ran into Burger King. I got him a Happy Meal, or got him a family little meal for, burger, whatever. Took it over there, and his was tall, skinny guy. So I went and hugged him. Well, I couldn't see his face because it's kind of like over my shoulder. Terry said the look on his face was like, is that what it feels like to be hugged?
Wow.
And I knew, like, that's what God was calling me to do, is to touch lives. Touch them with Christ, but to really touch them, just, to put your hands on them,
Mm-hmm.
And that's how our ministry started. When we got the building, like I said, we had 23 people there every single ministry day, because it was like a church, Anyone new here today? We haven't any people here for the first time. There was always hands that went up. We always had new people there.
The word was spreading.
Mm-hmm. It was almost all men. Until we had one woman. And Cindy come. And then Cindy invited Aurora. And Aurora invited Blanca. Of course, I know Blanca. Blanca was a lady who had never learned to read and write. She had 6 kids, was diagnosed, her 6th child, when she was born 3 or 4 weeks early. She was really tiny. She was under 5 pounds. She was like 4 pounds. And she actually was born early because of a tumor in the stomach area that the baby couldn't continue to grow in there. So the baby was born early. She's 10, I believe, this year, which is hard to believe.
Yeah.
And she is spunky. I mean, you would get such a kick out of her. But Brandon had come to visit. Your mom was with you. And Brandon took a whole set of pictures, and some of my favorite pictures to look at.
Yeah.
But she died of cancer, and the kids are in a orphanage halfway across the country. But their records have my name on it. So anytime I call and I want to go visit them, they will welcome me there. And I went there when I was there for Amy's wedding. Wendy took me there. I think you know Wendy too.
Mm-hmm.
And she took me to the orphanage, spent some time. We'd always take food there and had some toys and some clothes and whatever, And the kids walked in, spent some time with them. Jessica was not there, the older daughter. And she was always so skinny and had hardly any hair because of malnutrition. She walked in, and I thought she was one of the tias, or one of the workers that they usually call aunt, and absolutely gorgeous. She walked in, and I kind of looked at her and just, was talking to one of the other kids. And then
It hit you.
And I looked at her and I just stopped what I was doing. I'm like, oh my goodness, Jessica. You know, she came over, gave me a big hug and a kiss that I could not believe. I mean, kids are all grown up, doing fantastic. Alec, the one with the gorgeous eyes, the second oldest, he was going to university and is not going to university now. I talked to him maybe 2 months ago, but he's such a good kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just you see these kids and just.
Well, it's funny, like you look back now and see all these like what felt like micro decisions at the time, just a decision to be obedient or do something you feel like God's telling you to do, and then you see it looking back over time. You're like, wow, that really look what came out of that little what seemed like just being obedient at the
That's
time.
exactly right. Well, it's like I said, going to the street and patching a couple people that had cuts and bruises or whatever that were living in the street. I mean, that's not a big deal. Anyone would do that, you know? But look what it did to one life, you know?
Just, ripple effect.
It's just, and you see, I don't know, I just, to me, I can't help but get emotional, especially with Blanca's kids, because they were at every ministry day. I mean, they never missed. They always wanted to come in the kitchen and help dry the dishes. And they weren't pests. They were just such sweet, wonderful kids. Their whole life was horrendous. Blanca did not know how to be a parent. So her way of disciplining the kids would just reach over and smack them. And I would tell her, don't hit your kids. I mean, sometimes kids need a spanking. Sometimes kids, they need to be disciplined.
Yeah.
But you're reaching over and you're slapping them. They don't even know what you're hitting them for.
Right.
So look them in the eye and tell them what, but she wasn't capable of being a parent that way. She had never been parented, but you look at these kids now and I know that they will be good parents. It's.
Yeah, you give it a new opportunity.
Yeah, the opportunities that they had.
Yeah, that was one of the hardest things I've ever filmed, too. We got the opportunity when we knew she was going to pass to go upstairs and, she got to tell her kids, like a final message, which can you imagine going into a room?
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Mom.
Oh, that's right. She recorded. That's right.
And,
I forgot about that.
To speak to each of them, and they
gave a message for them.
See them on camera, getting greeted by them, and imagine recording a mom.
Yeah. Well, and your mom was there.
Yeah.
And she was, because we had a mezzanine, and so that's where you did that. And so your mom came up, and then your mom went back downstairs.
Yeah,
your mom, it was tearing her apart. I wanted to go back downstairs, but I had to be there.
Yeah.
And you were very emotional.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're a guy that gets overly emotional most of the time, but
with mission stuff, it's hard not to.
You see these kids. But yeah, I mean, I can still to this day look at that picture, and you could read each of those kids' faces.
Yeah.
The oldest one was so protective. Alec was there, and he was, kind of clinging to mom, but worried. Jessica wouldn't even look at mom. I mean, in fact, every time she was around me, she would cling to me. She knew mom was dying, and she just couldn't. And then you've got the two little boys. Juan Jose is Mr. Wild Boy, and so I don't know if he completely was getting what was going on. He's extremely ADHD, and Moises was so young. I think he was maybe 2.
Yeah,
and then the baby,
and
then the baby was like 2 months old, and
yeah. But they'll have that video now and hear their mom's voice.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
I forgot about that. I need to call the orphanage and talk to them and remind them that needs to be shared with the kids. Yeah.
So that was definitely a unique situation for me, but what an honor to be able to do it. It was very tough, but there's so many stories like that. We could probably go forever, but I know something else you wanted to touch on, because obviously you retired and came back from off the field, and that's hard too once you've been gone a long time, and that becomes your home.
It does. Yeah, and I mentioned to you when we were talking earlier that coming back, you go through what's called reverse culture shock, because it was funny. Even people that I knew that lived in Honduras that were not even Honduran, but, people that were there, part of our English church they went to, whenever we went to the States, would say, oh, did you have a good vacation back at home? And it's like, we were, we might have hit 10 churches in 3 weeks. Vacation.
Yeah, running in.
We were happy that we got to see family and friends or whatever, but wasn't a vacation. But people would say, that you went home. But the States wasn't home. When you're there 10 years, it becomes, your home is where you're living. And when it was time for us we knew that things were changing, and we knew that God was saying it's time to go back home. And then we went through, my husband got sick and passed away very rapidly.
When God knew that was coming too.
And,
it was
he got a pacemaker. We moved back the 1st of December. March 15th, he got a pacemaker put in. And he had never had heart problems before. And then a year later, in July, we had gone on a mission trip, came back, and 2 weeks later, he ended up in the hospital. And within 2 hours, I heard the C word, cancer. And 89 days later, it's gone. And we were really still going through the reverse culture shock, which takes about 4 years before you totally adjust to it. And so then in the middle of that, you've got all that. And I do want other people that have never served overseas to understand. And, if you've got someone in the church that has just come back from the mission field,
I like getting back from vacation.
Yeah. Invite them over and include them and stuff, and try to encourage them, because it's hard. You feel like you don't really belong in Honduras. I mean, I wasn't Honduran. I mean, I'm very olive complected, and I do tan really good. And every once in a while, a Honduran would say, "Are you Honduran?" And I'd say, "No, but thank you," because to me that's a compliment, Although they never thought my Spanish sounded like them.
They said that until you responded. You're like, oh, never.
Yeah, never mind. Yeah. My Detroit accent just kind of gave it away. But it's difficult when you're there and you come back home and you just feel like, well, that wasn't really home. I'm not Honduran, so I was there, and it took me a long time to adjust to living there. And now I'm back home, and everything in 10 years, everything is from 2006 to the end of 2015. Everything changed in the United States. Things were so different.
Yeah.
The very first year, we came back, it was just before Christmas. And people are coming up to us and saying, "Happy holidays." And I was like, because that year, it was like almost like illegal to say Merry Christmas. It's like, what?
Became the trend.
And so, at least in Honduras, everyone said, Feliz Navidad. And you didn't think twice about doing something like that. You greeted someone by saying, "God bless you." And all of a sudden, it's like, if you say anything about God, you're wrong. And it's like, culturally, I didn't belong in Honduras. I didn't belong in the States. And it feels really weird. Mm-hmm. So I want people to understand that they need to encourage people. If you have someone that that was in the mission field, or someone you go to church with that you don't know anything about, but that they just came off the mission field, reach out to them and encourage them, because it's brutal.
Yeah.
It's because you feel like you're like
upside down.
Yeah, like
between two places.
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah, we were warned there's like a big, because there's a lot of missionaries in Honduras, by a mission group that we belonged to. They helped us with legal stuff that had to be done, and they sent us this thing before we came back to the States, saying, just be aware that you are going to hit reverse culture shock. And I read the articles and did some studying on, some research online. And I thought, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you don't. It
hits you.
It hits you, and you're like, it's like, wow. It's just, it's strange. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is that there's times, mission field is hard. It can be, there's nothing, I would do it, every bit of it again. I do it,
That doesn't make it easy, though.
But it is the biggest blessing you can ever do, to be living in exactly what God wants you to do and what you were created for. But it's hard. It's really hard. And there were times when everything seemed like it went wrong. And I would come home from ministry and go, oh, what happened today? It was it's like just one thing after another that, you're dealing with people that are so broken, and and then I would open up my email and there would be, or Facebook or whatever, and have 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 but several. You were on my heart today. God put you on my heart today, so I'm praying for you. I just know that you're in the middle of something.
Yeah.
And just those notes meant the world.
Let you know you're not alone.
It's just, there was a guy that came and spoke at our mission conference in Honduras, and he was talking about Hold My Rope. And I don't know if you've ever heard this story, Hold My Rope. But Terry went out and bought rope and cut it and tied them in knots and stuff, and we would give them out when we spoke, and people would tie them to their keychains, and so that they would remember to keep us in prayer. But it often feels as a missionary that you are like on the edge of something and you're hanging on with your fingernails, and then someone throws you a rope and they're holding your rope for you.
Yeah.
And it's so important to reach out to people that are serving overseas and say, I'm holding your rope. I'm praying, which means I'm encouraging you. I'm praying for you. I'm thinking about you. What can I do?
Yeah.
Is there something that you need to have done, something that you need shipped to you, something that you, whatever?
Yeah. I hear that, as I think most people listening or watching this know, I work with missionaries all over. And I hear that over and over again as like, obviously when people come to visit, they bring stuff, but like, what is something you need out of people? Obviously funding, they need people to help give and be a part of it in that way, and prayer. But they say over and over, we need people just to reach out just to let us know, hey, I'm thinking about you.
Yep.
You exist. It's so easy to be
outside. They're all by myself.
Yeah, out of mind.
Without any emotional or spiritual support.
Yeah, and people, and it's easy when you're in the States and stuff, and you have to work your job, and you have a family, and you have bills, and things go wrong. Yeah, you just kind of forget. So you have to be very intentional about, like, hey, they're serving, and like I believe in them and what they're doing, and I love what they're doing, and let me just send a message and say, hey, how are you doing? And I'm praying for you, and keep up the good work, and read the emails people send out, the updates on their on their ministry. I try to be very intentional to do that, because like that's their heart and what they've been doing, and like read it and respond. It means so much to them. Yeah,
I'll tell you that one day. I mean, I don't remember what it was specifically that had happened, but it was just one of those brutal days. That was like one thing. It was like you're constantly putting out fires, and you're so exhausted. And I'm not talking about physical exhaustion. I'm just talking, you're just wiped out.
Yeah.
Because you're just constantly running and trying to help people and doing whatever. And at the end of the day, I mean, normally we came home. Of course, Honduras is very hot. And I did hear that it rained there this week. I'm not sure if it did, but I heard one person said April and May, it's usually like 105 degrees. And no rain, and if you look at the sky, it looks like there's clouds, and it's not clouds; it's dirt in the sky. And it's Terry and I usually, if we tried to go to the States, either to Michigan or to Georgia to do some speaking, we usually tried to do it during April, May, just to get away for a couple of weeks so that we could breathe.
Yeah,
because it was
basic lesson for people, like if it's summertime up here, it's wintertime down here. So when it goes to reverse the seasons, the sun and the heat comes right, and think about where's the hottest place on the earth, right? The equator. Which here's Honduras, here's the equator, here's Honduras, not very far.
It's
so when that sun is moving the angles, man, it really hits Central America and hard for a couple months.
And one of the things that as a missionary, I hated to do more than anything else. You got to know what it is. It's raising.
Yes, it's very difficult.
Because often you feel like you're begging.
Yeah.
But God sent us to do work.
Yeah.
We were very fortunate. Terry had a pension. Our home church supported us and kept increasing it because they came down often. They really believed in what we were doing. They saw it in action. They knew. And then I ended up getting a pension, which I didn't expect to get. One of our board members said Terry got a lump sum from the VA for a claim that he had put in for years earlier, which is actually what he died from, the cancer that he died from. And one of our board members said, because we used the money as a down payment on a van we needed for our ministry. And they said, well, you shouldn't have spent your own money on a van. It's like, it's not our money. It's. I believe fully that God gave us that money for our ministry.
Money God allows you to have.
Yes, we were able to take some small vacations and get away and do some stuff like everyone else in the world does.
Yeah.
But we were able to fund a lot of our ministry.
Yeah.
But there were times when we got down to, listen, dollars. Never ran out of money, ever. I had a lady that did all my accounting for me, volunteered to do this, wouldn't receive $1 from us, but did it all and sent out receipts. And so she's paying for stamps and everything else that she did. And there were times when we were down to like $5 or $10 in the mission account, and I get a note from Shirley saying, just got a deposit. I just got a donation, and I'm depositing tomorrow $500 or whatever. I always had it. But I think that anyone that is a believer in the Lord should be supporting missions.
Yeah.
Even if all you can give is $5 a month. That $5 does a lot.
Yeah.
Because not only does that $5, that's spendable.
Yep.
But that $5 says, I believe in you.
Yeah.
And I'm praying for you. And I'm thinking about you. And I'm part of your mission.
Yep. That's putting your faith in action.
It is.
At whatever level. It's like the woman that only had the 2 mites, right?
Yep,
like,
yeah.
That's all I got. And God,
that's all I've got. I'm giving it all.
Yeah,
you know?
That's it.
And if you teach your kids, okay, we go out to McDonald's once a month, or we go out to McDonald's every Friday, or whatever it is. This week is the week that we don't go to McDonald's, because that money, that $30 that would feed our family, which is probably more now because everything's so much more expensive now, but that amount of money is going to this and this missionary, or we're giving this part to this and this, and let your kids be part of that. No, tonight's the night that we're having macaroni and cheese at home because that money is going to help a mission, and we're going to pay attention to that mission, and we're going to pray for that.
What are they doing?
And so the kids are going to grow up thinking, that's what we do.
Yeah.
These people are there letting other people know about Jesus.
Yeah.
And how Jesus loves them.
Yeah.
It's so simple. Even if all you can send is $5. I've never drank coffee. I hear my husband laughing at me.
Yeah.
When I had COVID the first time, I had severe headaches afterwards. The only thing that gets rid of my headaches is caffeine. And so I love Dunkin' coffee. And so I go and get Dunkin' coffee at least twice a week. But I could sacrifice that if I wasn't giving to any mission.
Yep.
I give personally to missions, to 3 separate missions. Yours is one of them.
Yeah.
Because I believe in what you're doing.
Thank you.
I've got one in Cambodia that I give to. I have another one that I give to. I think that we should all be thinking that. It's just, and it's not, you don't have to give $50 or $100 if you can't afford to do that. If you can, great. Right. It's going to go further.
It's the action, the obedience of saying, I'm going to do something. That's what I tell people too, is it's pretty simple, but the only thing you can't do is nothing. Yeah. You have to do something. You have to respond, either a little bit, or if God's blessed you with a lot, guess what? You get to do a lot. And look at the impact you can make. But the thing is the obedience, the doing it.
Yeah. And there are people that cannot make ends meet right now.
Yeah.
And cannot do that.
And God knows.
But you can still send an email. You can still send a Facebook note.
That's free.
Encourage them,
Pray for them.
Also, if you know missionaries are here and they're visiting and they're speaking at churches and they're visiting relatives or whatever they're doing, they're in the States on furlough for sometimes, depending on what their mission group is. We were independent, so we were on our own schedule, but we usually came to the States twice a year. If you know they're in the States, don't avoid them because you're afraid they're going to ask you for money.
Yeah, that's a real thing too.
Invite them for dinner, because going, quite often, I like to cook. I'm a pretty good cook, and my husband and I had 6 kids between us. We have a blended family, and I did a lot of cooking. I cook Japanese food, I cook Chinese food, I cook Greek food. I like international food. I make fantastic Italian food. I do it all, and I've always done that. But when we started serving the mission field, I seldom cooked because I didn't have time. We were doing about 70 hours of ministry a week. And so,
Cooking for 100 people.
So I couldn't put food up like in the slow cooker because you never knew when you're going to lose your power.
Right.
And then you got to take a whole chicken and throw it in the trash because it's been sitting there all day long.
Yeah.
You know? So we ate a lot of our meals out. When we came home to visit, I always told my daughters, okay, I'm going to be in Georgia these dates. Please make sure that you have a meal for me, you know?
A real,
a real home-cooked meal because my daughters cook like I cook, you know? Other people would invite us for dinner. But there were nights that we ended up having to go to a restaurant because no one invited us. And it would have been so nice just to have a meal.
Yeah.
Because we ate at restaurants too often as it was.
Yeah.
So don't avoid missionaries because you're afraid they're going to ask you for money. If they ask you for money and you can't afford to give them money, say, I would love to do it, but I can't do it right now. Okay.
But I believe in what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, even that's, with people coming here to our place, we have this missions barn and just getting to see people in person, it makes it real. It's not just a post on Facebook or whatever. It's like these are real people. It's real lives. They're doing real ministry and putting it on the line. And that's what I encourage people. Get in the fight. That's the only thing you can't do is nothing.
Yeah. I mentioned to you that I often listen to podcasts in my car because I don't know why, but I'm in the car a lot, driving here and driving there. My only daughter that lives in Georgia lives about 45 minutes from me. So if I'm going out to the farm, it's 45 minutes each way. If I'm going to the doctor, I'm going whatever. I'm in the car a lot. So I listen to podcasts, I get to know these different people and know what they're doing. And then I can look their ministry up and it's like, oh, that's really awesome what they're doing. They're touching lives. They're making some changes and people are understanding how much the Lord loves them.
Yeah.
I mean, God didn't create me the way he created me without knowing that I was going to be doing something to touch lives.
Absolutely.
He created me to be a hugger.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that people in the street need to be hugged. It's just people need to just look at there's people in your lives, in your churches that you don't know. Get to know them, especially people that have served overseas. They've given their time. And while you're serving, it's not that we're sacrificing when we're serving, because I'll tell you something, there's no greater blessing.
Mm-hmm.
I would not have given up. Nothing in the world would make me want to have given up those years. Even though it was difficult because I was away from my family didn't totally understand why we weren't there for them. But we knew we were called, and it's just such a blessing to be there and to do what you're supposed to do. I mean, God has created each of us.
Yeah.
What did God create you for? What did God create, I know he created you with an eye to take pictures and to touch lives and to, when it was, and I can't think of her name now. Melissa? Is that her name? Dean?
Oh, yeah. Dean and Melissa.
Yeah, okay. I met her at a ladies' retreat. Her and I were in the same room together. First time I had ever met her. And then she told me about you. And then you came to,
Yep.
And
now I've been to Honduras like 15 times or something.
I know.
This is how it works. So,
yeah, I only know one person, I think, that has been to Honduras more times than you have.
Wow. That
doesn't have their own ministry there.
Yeah.
But goes back and forth and serves with several ministries there.
Awesome.
It's just, but God has called each of us to do something. And whether, I know people that are too elderly to be able to go on a mission trip, but they will always give money to someone that's going on a mission trip so that they are funded to be able to go.
There's CEOs of companies and stuff that God's put a lot of money in their hands and expects a lot financially from that. There's people that, like I said, there's a ladies group at a church that they sew stuffed animals and they send it to me, and I've taken them probably 10 countries.
those
you know?
stuffed animals that we took to Honduras, to Ulysses Church, those are the cutest stuffed animals I've ever seen.
And the
in my
kids'
life.
face just light up, and they're like, "Why am I getting this?" I'm like, "That's your open door. That's your window to say, because Jesus loves you. People in the States are thinking about you and praying for you.
Strangers, people that don't even know you,
They care about you. They want you to know. They want you to know that Jesus loves you.
Those are some
You're not forgotten.
stuffed animals. Yeah, it's just
so, and it's because these ladies have this ability, this gift, and they love people. They love missions, and they just do what is in their DNA.
And they can't get on a plane and go.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm 75 years old, and I'm not going to be able to do many more mission trips. But there's still things I can do.
Yeah,
you know?
you're never not a missionary. You're retired from the field full time, but you're always a missionary.
Absolutely. I mean, my friends that live in Cambodia, I will see if they're actually coming to the States. Their second oldest is going to start college. Their oldest is already in university. And so they're bringing her in to get her settled. And so the whole family's coming in. And they always stay in Maryland. So from my daughter Laura's house, it's like 2 hours. So I can go see them. But I'm with them when they're there.
Yeah.
Even though I haven't gone and visited them, and they've been there for 15 years. They went to, right after we went to the mission field, they went to the mission field. But I know that I'm part of their ministry.
Yeah, absolutely.
That, you know, and they know that. They know that if they've got a need, she wanted some coffee one time. It's like, okay, I'll put the box together. I'll call a couple other people and have them collect some stuff, and we'll get some stuff and get it shipped to you.
Yeah.
She wanted a certain type of coffee, and she said, "Can you send me some taco seasoning?" Or no, ranch, the dried ranch seasoning. She uses that for several things. I was like, okay, we'll put that together. You know?
Yeah. Just let them know. You can do whatever you can do.
But you gotta, you gotta reach out and do what you can, even if you can't serve next to them. By doing whatever you can do for them is you are to serve right
you're
next
a part
to
of it. Yeah. Part of the team.
And being a missionary, serving the Lord and doing what you were created to do. I just don't think there's a greater blessing.
Absolutely.
It's just it's living in His will, just makes everything kind of sunny.
Yes. Well, so it's like that feeling of being fulfilled because you're doing what you were created to do. And then once that happens, it's like a light bulb moment. Like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the first time that I hugged Marvin, I mean, I can remember that, and that was back when we first moved to Honduras. So that was probably the end of 2006, the beginning of 2007. I'm talking, so it's a long time ago. Yeah. And because I'm so visual, I can still see me hugging him. And then I can hear Terry say, "You should have seen his face. His whole face just changed. Like, wow, what's that hugs like?" You know?
Yeah.
Because no one had been kind to him. No one had given him a hug, you know? And I know that God created me to do just that, to go to Honduras and hug Marvin and a whole bunch of other people.
Yeah. That's awesome.
But look what I got myself, you know? While I'm hugging him, guess what? He's hugging me. And just, it's a joy to be able to serve.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because you are living exactly what God wants you to do. It is.
That's awesome. You got any more notes you wanted to hit, or do we hit everything?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for stopping by and taking the time. We ended up actually having to do it pretty late at night, but I'm so glad we got to get it in before you left and heading to the West Coast. And,
my daughter and I are driving to the Redwoods. And
enjoying life. And it's just an honor to have you stop in and get to be on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, you and your whole family, your mom and Kristen, and now I got to know your daughter. Just, I feel like your family.
Yeah, you're definitely. I've told you before, you're like my mission mama.
Yeah,
so,
you did say that to me. Yeah, that made me very happy.
Yeah, so it's an honor to have you on and introduce you to everybody that's watching and listening, and yeah.
And I just hope with our discussion that a couple people see things or hear things that make them think, I never thought about that. Encourage a missionary today.
Yeah, activate. Do something. That's what this is all about. That's what Mission Field Media is all about. Is getting off the couch and getting into the fight.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening, and thanks for stopping by. It's been a joy.
Yep. For me too. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks again for joining us on the Mission Field Media podcast. We so appreciate you taking the time to watch and listen to what God is doing all around the world through all these missionaries and ministries. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and find us on the social media apps and follow us there as well. Tell all your friends about it. We couldn't do any of this without the listeners like yourself and our sponsors. Thank you so much, and we look forward to having you join us again on the Mission Field Media Podcast.